The champ is in the house. We present him with his crown and we reveal the Fantasy Ruckers MLR Playoff Challenge that you can take part in. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 22 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to all of our Fantasy Ruckers League members, all our Fantasy Ruckers community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. And as always with me, Matt Yee, Devin, Vandy Vanderpool. Guys, we got a jam-packed show today to get to. So many different topics to talk about. Obviously, we had a round 18. We had some big news, to say the least, that happened within the last few days. And of course, playoffs are nearing here in the MLR. But before we get into any of that, guys, how's it going?
Well, I gotta interject here real quick. Steven, I'm not wearing your jersey for one reason. The boys are in the Stanley Cup Finals!
Buddy, get out of here. This is a rugby show.
Okay, anyways.
This is a rugby show, and you know what? There's no Stanley Cup Final for your little...
Nope, fair enough.
Well,
that was for Steven
the
and
Ruck
Steven
and Goat
alone.
team, all right?
That was just for Steven.
The Ruck and Goats is far away from the Stanley Cup Finals of this Fantasy Ruckers.
He says a Leafs fan.
Ooh.
Whatever.
Well,
hey,
we'll leave
I'm
it.
in last place, baby.
We'll leave it at that. But yeah, Vandy, I know you had to get that off your chest. But yeah, there's a lot of rugby to talk about. I'm glad you guys are doing well. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the world of Major League Rugby. It's also one of the most exciting times of playoffs just around the corner. And we just wrapped up playoffs in the Fantasy Ruckers League as well. And we revealed the champion last week. And now it is time to finally bring him on this show to do our championship trophy presentation. And that is John JJ Tolton, the owner of Lads on Tour. Bro, welcome to the show once again. It is you who survived the gauntlet that was the Fantasy Ruckers League final, and you are here now crowned the champion of our very first season. How does it feel?
Oh, feels great. I was sweating during the week a little bit while the games were going on. I had an early yellow card. I think that set me back a decent amount, but no, it feels good to come up on top. Long season. It's been a bit of a grind for sure. I think you Ryan, probably felt the biggest grind having to stat everything out, but yeah, it was a grind for sure. Long season.
You watched an early yellow card, and then you watched Fidel score 3 50-meter tries, and then I'm sure you were pretty relaxed after that.
After a second, I felt pretty good. Felt pretty safe, but no, shout out to Ed Fidel for sure. He's I compare this to my like one of the first seasons I played fantasy football. I drafted Lamar Jackson as my backup one year, and he ended up winning MVP. This is the same sort of feeling as that, you know, when you draft someone late, and like Lamar Jackson won me the chip that year in his MVP year. It's kind of the same.
When you still bust on Mike Teo, and then you still have Ed Fidel, yeah, that's pretty good.
Bust on Mike Teo. That's cool.
Yeah, not too bad at all. And we revealed it last week, the champion, you winning it. And it was a close matchup. We broke it all down. So if you want to listen to that breakdown of that finals matchup, fantasy finals matchup, you can check out last episode. But it was a relatively close one between you and Hokie John. 50.4 fantasy points for you, 33.7 for Hokie. Yeah, I mean, it was Ed Feed. That was a historical performance by him. 27.3 fantasy points. I believe he had over 120-meter try distance total, I think, which, I mean, when you have a guy scoring basically more than 50% of your points, you're not going to be losing many matchups. I know the Dankus Anchors definitely have had some weeks where they could definitely pull it close, but not this week. Ed Fidel had it pretty much in control. Some other big contributors, Sam Malcolm doing a good thing off the boot, 7.5 fantasy points for him. And then Lourdes Vanderskiff, that ended up being a huge pickup for you, John, 7.6 fantasy points in this matchup as well. You want to just talk about your roster build and kind of your thoughts about the season and kind of your strategy going in?
Yeah, I had the number one pick, so I did a lot of I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, I didn't want the number one pick because this is such a new season. I didn't know, and like new sort of format and everything. You didn't really know, like in other sports, you take running backs first, you just kind of know who you're going to take at number one. It's kind of consensus in other fantasy sports. But for this one, I didn't really know. So I wanted Mike Teo. We didn't really work out the way I planned to. And I'll be honest, this might sound like I'm boosting myself a bit here, but I was between Mike Teo and Bodine Walker for that number one pick. Those are the two guys I was kind of choosing between. But I thought I could get a fly half later on who was consistent. I ended up finding one with Sam Malcolm, which I was happy about. But man, if I picked up Walker, it could have been game over from early on. I could have just absolutely ran away with it. But went with Teo, just had to give everyone else a little bit of a chance. No, I'm just kidding.
There it is.
I will say Bodine Walker did go second pick in the second round. So there was a lot of, I guess, room there for you to pick up that guy. But nonetheless, yeah, you had to make it at least somewhat fair for the other players in our league. And I guess you made it a little bit of a challenge, but nonetheless, you were able to come out on top. And we mentioned it last show. We mentioned the show before about what you guys were playing for in this championship matchup. And first, we had a reveal 2 weeks ago of our Fantasy Ruckers Championship Jersey. And you can see it's not behind me. It usually is in this spot right here, but it had to go through some alterations here for our very first champion. So let me show you here, John, about what we got here with our championship jersey, okay? Look at that. We got you etched. We got you etched in the, let's get that there.
That's beauty.
In the history of the Fantasy Ruckers League there with the name on the jersey, the very, very first name on the jersey. And we're hoping this gets filled out much more throughout the seasons to come. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, we have the Barbarians Championship Fantasy Ruckers League jersey that we revealed a couple weeks ago. We're going to be recording the names of the yearly champions in our Fantasy Ruckers League on this jersey to kind of keep track of it. Kind of nice little memento for everyone. And hey, John, that's going to hang up right here, man. We're going to put that right here for everyone to see. And your name is now forever in the history books in the Fantasy Ruckers League.
I'm gonna try to go back to back next year. That's the
oh
plan.
My
anyway.
God.
Oh.
This guy.
Your goal now is it will only be your name on this jersey, eh?
Whoever.
That would be quite funny if it was just a repeat. Copy and paste that over and over and over again for the next few years. I know you'll be pushing for that. But we also had another thing in store for our league champion. And that is still in the works. We're trying to figure out how we're going to get this done. But you did win this matchup in playing for the BC Grassroots Rugby Foundation. And we will be donating $220 in your name, John, to that foundation. It was really cool, actually. We tweeted it out last week, the announcement, and had it on Instagram. And they actually reposted and put it into their story and things. We're so grateful for what you guys are doing with the rugby and allowing it to grow. And whether it's real rugby or I guess in this case fantasy rugby, either or, it doesn't really matter. We're going to help out either way. So we're going to work with you there, John, to make sure we get that $220 to the BC Grassroots Rugby Foundation and get that donation in your name because that is well deserved, just as important, if not more important than the championship jersey behind me. But without that being said, with all the presentation and everything, we do want to pick your brain at how kind of this fantasy league went because you do have the bragging rights here, man. You are the one that I guess whatever strategy you did, whatever stickies you used and you showed us last week, it seemed to do something. So we want to help out the people who may be getting into the fantasy rugby scene. Also help out Matt and Devin here because obviously they need a little bit of help of the way they finished their seasons as well.
I'm catching strays over here.
I can pencil you guys into a couple of one-on-one sessions.
This is going to be
you got a little bit of time.
Okay, what do you charge?
We'll talk after. We'll talk offline.
Yeah, perfect.
We'll see. But yeah, there are a few things that we do want to talk about to ask you and just kind of get your idea about how you really approach this season. And my first question for you, John, is we know, and we've mentioned this in shows before, that you are an advocate fantasy sports player, right? Whether it's basketball, whether it's football. Right. You seem to be at the top in every single league that I am happening to be in with you. I guess my question for you is, was there anything that you have used in the past that were successful in other sports and other leagues that translated to fantasy rugby in the way that this is all set up that kind of helped you get to where you are? Because it obviously had a little bit of help here getting you the chip in the very first season.
And why do you feel the need to cause league-wide sadness in every league that you join? That's just a follow-up.
I don't know. Something about the Yee Brothers League is good luck for me. I can't say I have the same success in other leagues I play in, but I seem to always do well in you guys' league. So I hope to keep that trend going anyways. But yeah, compared to other leagues, I think the big thing, and I think I spoke on this last time I was on, was kind of just like having faith and consistency a little bit in your lineup. You know, because once you if you can squeak into the playoffs even late, you can always make a run. You know, I think being smart about positions. I think what Hokie said last week, with the spine of the team, was helpful for me. You know, guys who play 80 minutes, that's 3 points right there. So those little things that kind of translate into like easy points. There's some positions where you're not going to get points, like second row. Like you're not really looking for a guy who's going to get you high or nice or anything. So yeah.
And don't forget sticky notes. You need sticky notes.
Sticky notes. Oh yeah, you need sticky notes. I like sticky notes for every position. I did that with the basketball and the football as well, like sticky notes for positions that I think are important. I kind of have a draft board at the start. I think the draft's really important. And then even stats with like that the MLR started releasing, like tackles made. It's kind of a good translation into like how much they're playing. So I had guys like Sladen McDowell who made a ton of tackles, and he ended up scoring a couple of tries as well. Someone like Mike Smith from the show, mine, like tackle machine. I think Matt and I have been on the opposing end of a couple of his tackles in training a couple of times. So we know he tackles like a beast and is a non-stop motor. He probably got bandied a decent amount of points, like 3 points anyways, of playing full 80 minutes. And stuff like that. I think there's little stats that you don't really, you know, tries assists and drafting the right positions at the right time. I think our guys in our league now are going to try to, after playing this year, figure that out a little bit about which positions, like wingers going to score tries, right? Maybe don't take him so early. Like when I took Teo early, like he scored a couple tries this year, but I definitely kind of wish I took a fly half or a hooker, even who's going to get a ton of points and a lot of minutes. I guess, I don't know, I'm kind of ranting a bit here, but
no, that's usually helpful.
You're gloating.
But no, it makes sense, man. I mean, I think there was a lot to learn through this season that I think will be carried over differently into next season, at least in terms of strategies and the way that people kind of learned as they kind of moved along through the 2022 MLR campaign. But with that being said, though, John, is there anything, and it's hard to say, you know, you being at the top, if there's anything that you would change, but you talk about the drafting, but at least in season wise, is there anything that you would approach differently? I know you took kind of the mindset of not really making as many pickups versus a guy like Hokie that you faced in the final. He was making pickups left and right every single week, trying to find that kind of prize money play or prize money player that's going to win him that week. With you really didn't take that approach. You really relied on those guys that you drafted and maybe a few pickups here and there. Is there anything that you would change in season going into next year?
No, I think don't fix what ain't broke, right? Don't reinvent the wheel, sort of thing. It worked for me this year. I think that's probably a strategy I'd stay with. Obviously, I got lucky, like not that many injuries. You know, player availability for my team was generally quite good. Like I didn't have to make like weeks where I had to pick like 4 or 5 guys up because the guys just weren't playing, which I think was helpful. But I think I would probably pay closer attention to the waiver wire. Like I wasn't that good at it. I think I was the only guy in the, you know, Western time zone, Pacific time zone here. I think maybe Hokie was as well, but I feel like I missed a lot of waiver deadlines. I was like, oh man, I missed the waiver deadline again. I hope it doesn't bite me in the ass. I got lucky a couple of times, didn't bite me in the ass. I think like my big pickup, mid-season pickup, was Vanderschiff, or Vanderschiff, however you say his name. Maddie probably is a good way to pronounce his name. What would you go for, Maddie?
Yeah, Vandersyke, man.
Vanderschiff.
But no, that's a good point. I mean, John, to be fair, this is probably the most manual fantasy league, whatever sport that you're in, that exists out there. You know, when you play fantasy football, when you play fantasy baseball, when you play fantasy basketball, you have the app to rely on, right? And everything's automated. So you know when that waiver deadline's coming, you can punch in those waivers beforehand and you can get that all set up. With the way that our league is operating right now, and hopefully we can change that sometime soon, it really is down to the owner. And if you're not having that discipline, or if you're not having that awareness and that extra, I guess, wherewithal to kind of grind through that manual labor that is this fantasy rugby league, it gets tough sometimes, but nonetheless, it seemed to not really affect you that much, at least enough to shake you off of your championship run here. So I'm
happy that I put up my most ever points in the season in the final. I think that made me feel a little bit better about myself, because I was like, man, lowest points against, so not a really good look. Like, I'm probably an underdog kind of going into this, even though I finished top, because HOU and the other sort of semifinal teams put up a ton of points during the season and also had a ton of points against. They really grinded out wins. But yeah, having them the most points in the season in my final week was a good feeling for me. Icing on the cake.
And
yeah,
hey,
the
I will
championship
say,
wasn't enough, eh? You just had to have a little bit more. You needed something more than just the
Extra,
championship.
no, a little extra.
and I will say, guys, too, that I do believe that at the end of the day, the two best teams did end up in our fantasy playoff. I did think that the Dankest Anchors, HOU, the amount of work that he put in all season long, the waiver wires, how in tune he was with this team and really buying into this whole fantasy rugby thing. I really do think that he was one of the top teams there. And then you had obviously John here, who was rolling throughout the season, kind of, sneakily staying up there in the top of the standings, and then ends up, getting that top seed and then beating the Dankest Anchors in the final. Matt, I'm not even gonna ask why you got that weird face. What are you objecting to?
You got that weird face. That's his normal face.
Hold on. Dude, we're right here, Ryan. We're in the room. You're just gonna.
I don't know what you want me to say.
Just right to our face. Just we suck. You can say
I
it.
did not
Just
say.
it.
I
Just let
did.
us know.
Hey, there are 8 other guys that are in this league. 2 of them got to be the best, and it ain't you guys this year. I'm sorry to say, you guys finished 7 and 8, man. I'll go right out. I ain't babying you guys. I'm not babying you guys. It's ridiculous.
Maybe you need to try and join.
No,
this
cry
thing.
me
You
a
probably
river,
would've
Matt.
been
Go
a
cry me a
nice
river, dude. Come on. But yeah, no, I do think though, opposite polar spectrum of what Vandy and Matt were going through. I'll say more Matt here because he's kind of laying into it. But John and HOU really doing well all season long. But
I was a toilet
man,
bowl finalist.
good job, man. Good. You know what? That yes. Good job. Yes, toilet bowl finalist. Let me get you a trophy, man.
You know what? I couldn't even make it there. Okay.
You can actually name on the butt crack of the jersey.
Get some barbarian shorts and then write my name just right on the back of it.
Then we'll get the full kit going. You know what? You might be onto an idea there. But nonetheless, though, John, are there any other kind of points that you have, advice? I know we mentioned it last show or the show before about trying to get more people involved into this fantasy rugby thing in the MLR. We do have, and I'm teasing it a little, we're going to announce it in a little bit, there's going to be an opportunity for people to get their first taste of fantasy rugby, even if you weren't in our league this season. So for those guys, I guess, in preparation for that, John, do you have any advice for kind of guys that are looking at, maybe not so much from a waiver wire perspective or from a necessarily drafting perspective, but more so actually playing the game, looking out for what types of players that you should look out for that are beneficial in fantasy MLR? What are you kind of thinking there, and what is your advice for some people who may get a chance to dive into it for the first time in less than a week here?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of squad rotation the last couple of weeks. It was finish up the season, so I think starting lineups are going to be kind of hard to predict. Whether coaches decide on form or whether guys they go back to guys who were trusted for them all year long. So I think lineups are gonna be hard to predict in the last couple of weeks here. Like even last week's lineups are crazy, all over the place. Especially with the recent announcements with the Gil teams.
Which we'll get into for sure.
You guys are obviously gonna get into a lot. Don't pick any of their players, ideally. That's probably not a good call. But if you see someone like Vanderscheid, the reason I picked him up was I saw Latour, Matai Latour is sevens, USA Sevens guy. He played every week at 12 for the SaberCats. And then one week he was shifted out into the wing, and this guy at Vandershift just came in at 12, and I was like, he must be pretty good. So I just picked him up. It's kind of random. I needed a center. But that's sort of thing where you see a good player who's been consistent getting booted out for someone else you don't really hear of. Maybe worth a roll of the dice there. Lineup change is gonna be hard. So if you have any insider knowledge who's playing and who's not playing, I know HOU is the Schefter of the league. He always knows things.
Yeah, that's right.
And we've mentioned in episodes before too that some of our league members actually have reached out to players on social media to ask if they're actually starting.
Hey, John,
maybe that's something that we have to do.
John, just to let you know, I tried that with Mike Smith, and Mike Smith shut me down.
Oh yeah,
They
Mike. Well,
shut me down. I asked him. I said, "Hey, is Osberger gonna play this weekend?" He goes, "We'll find out when the lineup comes out." And I was like, "Really?
Thanks, Mike.
Really?"
I never actually reached out to any like Co or Ben or any other UBC guys who are in the league about lineups, anything like that. So, I mean, if you know, you know. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's some words of wisdom from our Fantasy Ruckers League champion. He says you got to keep an eye out for those lineups. Make sure you're seeing who's starting and who's sitting and who's getting that playoff confidence from their coaches there, especially when it comes into playoff time. Yeah, I mean that's some good advice, and I'm sure a lot of the people who are going to be playing in this potential playoff challenge coming up soon here this week will apply some of that. But John, thank you for hopping on the show here.
Hey,
I was glad we were able to.
Before John leaves, I
Okay.
think we should get a firm commitment from the champion that you will be back next year. An official announcement that you will be back next year to protect and to hoist the trophy once again.
Yeah, oh, come on now. It'd be rude not to, right? To defend it. It's nice to kind of go out on top, but no, I got to come back. I'm excited to see what you guys have planned for this playoff one. I might take a step back on that one. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe enjoy
Too much winning.
without the stress. Ease up on the winning a bit. So I will see. I'm definitely in for next regular season for sure.
Hey,
Right on.
I'll sign my name on the dots there.
We'll see whether or not you can get your name on that jersey a few more times here in the next few seasons. But hey, John, glad to have you on, man. Congratulations once again for winning the very first Fantasy Ruckers League title. Your name's etched in history, man. It's on the jersey. It's on the Fantasy Ruckers League jersey, and also doing a little bit of good work here on the way to helping out the BC Grassroots Rugby Foundation. So, John, thanks again, man, and congrats, and we'll see you soon, man. I'm sure we'll get you on the show in a few episodes here.
Sounds good. Thanks for all the hard work, fellas.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Thanks for reminding me how much I suck.
Well, that is John, owner of Lads on Tour. Once again, very first champion of the Fantasy Ruckers League. Does it feel that bad, Matt? Does it really feel that bad when someone comes on who's winning matches? It's that tough, eh?
You know, life's tough at the bottom here. Life's just tough at the bottom. That's all I gotta say. I'll get there though.
We'll get
Maybe
there.
not
You're taking notes. I see.
Rebuilding phase.
True. And I see you taking notes, man. I see you. You're gonna be coming in hot with those tips, or with that hokey, and then John have been laying down. So I don't think
It's just gonna be a rendition of how do I keep sucking? How do I keep sucking?
Yeah. Well, what I learned is basically I'm gonna miss all the waiver wires. I'm gonna make one pickup in the year. I'm gonna save my fab to the end to stop people from picking up big signings, and I'm gonna draft Mike Teo in the first round.
And I mean, to be fair, you may want to try taking that strategy, but also I don't think a guy like Ed Fidow is popping up, in usual places there that will help you out there. But we'll see. But yeah, congrats again to John. It was a fantastic season. There was just, he says it was a grind. It was a grind. It was a long haul, but I mean, a lot of commitment from our league members, a lot of commitment from just everyone involved in this project, and it made it a lot of fun, man. And I know that Matt and Vandy, you both had a lot of fun this fantasy rugby year too. Vandy, you diving in rugby period for the first time, and Matt, you applying your rugby knowledge, however successful that may have been, your rugby knowledge to the fantasy world. It made it at least entertaining and interesting, at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, hey, people love watching a man get knocked down from the pedestal, so there's nothing wrong with that.
You have to get on the pedestal first.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Come
I don't
on.
ever remember getting close to a pedestal.
There we go. Well, hey, the fantasy rugby content does not stop, though. The league and the season may be done. The regular season for the MLR may be done. The official Fantasy Ruckers League may be done to compete for this title. Excuse me. But that will be available for next season. But we do have more rugby content coming out for you guys, especially with this MLR Playoff Challenge as well, which we're going to talk about in just a moment's time. But before we get into any of that, make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers on social media, on YouTube. Like, subscribe. It really helps us out, and it helps us grow this fantasy rugby thing and making it a reality in the MLR. So make sure you do that. And also, if we ever are able to expand this thing to more leagues and get more people involved, including this Fantasy Ruckers Playoff Challenge, you'll be wanting to follow us because that's where you are going to hear the first thing about any information or details about joining, that kind of stuff. So make sure you head online and go do that. It helps us out quite a bit. And now it's time to get into it, guys. John alluded to it a little bit here, but there were some really big news that came out this past week, and it started very, very much so. It started out on, I believe it was on June 3rd, so that would have been on Friday, that the announcement came out that the Austin Gilgronis had been disqualified from the 2022 postseason play due to a violation of league rules. And it doesn't end there. We thought it was done. We thought it was going to be finished, but then just yesterday, it came out that the Giltinis as well have been disqualified from the 2022 Major League Rugby competition due to a violation of league rules. And we still don't quite know what those league rules are or what league rules were violated as of yet. There has been speculation and rumors going around. There was an article released yesterday on The Guardian that cited certain sources across the league have been saying that it was due to a salary cap violation. Now, I want to make this clear to everyone who is listening and watching that none of this has been confirmed. None of this has come out by the MLR, but that is kind of the rumblings and rumors that are circulating around the MLR community. But guys, first reaction when you saw this, first the Gilgronis getting disqualified and then the Giltinis, what are your thoughts, man?
Well, I mean, it's probably like everybody else's thoughts. What just happened? Like, how do the two best teams just out of nowhere, they're just done. They both went respectively 12 and 11 wins in 16 games, dominated the pitch most games, and then did not even be in playoffs is groundbreaking. Where else have you ever seen this? Like,
I don't even know what the heck is going on after such a competitive season. All of a sudden, all it is ending in controversy and drama. And I guess MLR putting their foot down and not letting Mr. Gilchrist, not letting Mr. Gilchrist break any of the rules and really sending a message out to the league and saying, hey, like, this is what's going to happen. You can be the best team in the league. You can come in here and finish at the top of your conference. You can be in second in the conference. But hey, if you break our rules, looks like they're going to be ruthless and a bunch of savages and just absolutely, punish you the way that they feel is right. And that's what happened.
Well, I got to add that is because I think that's what the MLR is trying to do, right? Like I said, we don't know exactly what was violated and what rules were violated, but at the very least, we can say that the MLR is trying to set a precedent here. They're making sure that this is not going to happen again, and if anyone are going to violate the rules, in this way, in this manner, they're not going to have a shot at winning a championship. They're going to face penalties, and it's going to be tough. And we won't know whether or not this ruling was fair because obviously there are a lot of different parties involved. Let's say it was a salary cap violation. Some people are obviously going to argue that maybe why are the players being punished for something that that management controls, things like that. So we don't know whether or not the punishment really matches the crime as of yet because there has been no clarity given out by the MLR. But nonetheless, we can say at the very least that there was a precedent being set here and they're trying to make sure that this never happens again.
But this is exactly where what the problem is though. There is no clarity on what precedence is being set. There's no clarity on what is this, what precedence and what rule and nothing is clear on what they're putting their foot down on and what we know they're going to be strict on, if we don't know what they're being punished for. I mean,
well, I feel like all that'll clear itself up. You know what I mean? As far as my take from it, new to rugby, the whole thing would just be that deep pockets aren't going to buy you a win here, and cheating the system. And just because you finished top of the league and you won last year doesn't mean that they're just going to sweep this under the rug until it's a fine in the offseason. Like I've said, even with the refereeing, man, the MLR just seems to be handling certain situations that I've seen handled poorly in other sports perfectly.
And talk about timing too,
But
because
I mean, sorry, just to back on that, but like with the referee and with the disciplinary, they tell us exactly what law was broken. They tell us after this is the disciplinary
But I think
report. This is what it is. There's no delay in terms of announcement and what rule was broken, and that's where I'm like.
But I don't think it's as white
Right.
and black as that.
Exactly, and that's what I'm gonna say too, Vanny, and I agree with you there. Is that we don't know, right? We don't know what is happening behind the scenes. We don't know what legal ramifications are happening behind the scenes. We don't know any of it, right? And the MLR has come out and they made it clear that the information will be released as it becomes available and as it is the right time to do so. Yes, as a fan, as an MLR fan, we all obviously want as much transparency as possible, right? That is what we want as fans. We want to make sure that we are as in the know, especially when it comes to things like I couldn't even imagine. I'm not an AG fan. I'm not a Giltinis fan, but I couldn't even imagine, right, what those fans are feeling like right now. And that's to your point, Matt. And those are the people that want that clarity and want that transparency and want to know right away. Because, hey, you just knocked out my team from the playoff when we thought we had a really good shot of winning a championship, right? The Giltinis were looking to go back to back. AG were rolling all season long and looked all uphill. And they looked like one of the favorites to come away with the MLR championship. And now the fans are left with nothing. And I think especially to that point, Matt, at the same time as I'm saying with Vandy and agreeing with Vandy about there is probably a lot of behind the scenes stuff that is preventing there to be kind of that transparency up front. But I do at the same time understand why people and fans, especially those of Giltinis and Gilgronis, are frustrated with the lack of communication and transparency.
But I would say the one thing is I seen something pop out today. It was a tweet by somebody. I'm not sure who exactly it was. And they said maybe a third team's involved. And then he quickly backtracked that comment and said, sorry, I gaslighted a situation. He wasn't aware or whatever happened. So I would say in that situation, the discipline that has been handed out is deserved. They're aware that there was a mistake made with that third team, but I would say, yes, maybe you don't have the answers, but at the end of the day, they did something to violate the rules.
Yeah, but like, I guess the other thing that I'm thinking is like, what other league in the world is going to lay down this type of punishment without at least planning some sort of release of, hey, this is what happened. There's like, you look at the NFL, you look at NHL, you can even look at, the Premier League for rugby, the Premiership in England, when the Saracens, and Vandy, this might be news to you, but the Saracens, a club team over there, basically did the exact same thing. They broke the salary cap violation. Once it came down, and I'm fairly certain that once the ruling came down, it was announced that this is what they did. This would be their punishment. They would be relegated, and that's how it was. There was no miss or no kind of area of confusion of, okay, what's going on here? Why are they being relegated? Why are they being punished? And for all we know, yes, the rumors are speculating that it's a salary cap thing, but the two things that are common between the two teams that got disqualified is only the owner, not necessarily the management. It's only the owner, and if it's something that the owner did, Mr. Gilchrist did, like let's say that possibly he did something, then it begs the question of, is this the right punishment? Why are the players being punished for something that the owner is responsible for, kind of thing?
Wow,
but we don't know. We can't make that judgment at all.
I would say,
right. I mean, let me just clear it up and say, I think once things start coming out, right, on both sides, so I think I understand both of you. I understand, Vandy, where you're coming from, and Matt, I completely understand where you're coming from as well. I do think as information starts getting released, and I'm hoping that we're going to start to see some stuff within the next few weeks, that we'll understand why there was this delay in the transparency in the information. Now, Matt, if they come back to me and we hear something where it's like, okay, there was no excuse for you to withhold that information. You were just trying to buy time in order to, save, the publicity surrounding this whole fiasco and the controversy around this, then we can have that argument. But I think we just need to stay put here until we kind of get all this information sorted out and understand that. But yeah, we really won't know until we hear what rules rules were violated, whether or not the punishment matches the crime, whether or not it was right for the MLR to just, be pretty generic here so far. We won't know any of that until the information comes out. And I think once that happens, we can make our verdict on whether or not we think this was the right way to go around things. With that being said, you're right, Matt. The common denominator between these two teams is the owner, Adam Gilchrist, of both the Giltinis and the Gilgronis. I mean, when you're hearing that, right, it's tough to not think about, to start building up these rumors and say, hey, yeah, you know what? There have been rumors of these salary cap issues before surrounding Giltinis. It's not surprising that the Gilgronis then, faced that punishment, and then not too long after, the Giltinis facing the same thing. So it's just tough. And then you're just seeing a lot of things swirling around. We were talking about earlier in the season, right? The Gilgronis were going to get sold, right? There were rumors that the Gilgronis were going to get sold. Well, and once again, I'm saying this, that a lot of this is speculation. A lot of this is not certain, and it's nothing is set in stone yet. But it's just weird that there you have a team that is thinking about being sold. Maybe the MLR starts looking around at more financial stuff because of the finances that are involved with moving that team. They find out something, and then that that's the first string, right? The first thread that gets pulled. And then you're like, okay, if this is the team that's, dealing with all this stuff, okay, this owner also owns another team. Let's look into that team. Yeah. Then they found out the same exact thing. They have to then punish this team. And then it's not surprising that they then start looking into other teams just in case. And obviously that third team that was tweeted about was cleared, and there wasn't anything involved there. But you can't just say it's a coincidence that the two teams that are owned by the same man are both getting disqualified, right? There is something fishy there.
Gilchrist isn't selling a car; he's selling a business. The Gilgronis is a business, so when you sell that, you open up everything. All the legal fees, everything, the arena, the staff that comes with it, everything. So if you're seeing things that are being withheld, huge legal concerns. Exactly what Ryan said. You have to dig into, obviously, his other business in the league, and that would be the Giltinis.
Right.
But that being said, Mr. Gilchrist, I figured you could use some help here. So instead of trying to get a Busch Light sponsor, I thought I would just try and get one of these bad boys, the old Gillies.
Oh.
You know what? I made myself.
You know what, Danny? I thought I'd help out too. So I got one too, man. Let's go. Let's pop it open.
So we can sell liquor. If only we could sell jerseys too.
Boys, I guess that's the next thing. Hey, he reached out and said, hey, you better promote this new Gillies jersey. So I got myself a Gillies jersey.
Hey, there we go. Cheers to that. Let's go.
I'll drink to that.
Cheers, boys. Cheers.
Helping out Mr. Gilchrist as much as we can. Yeah, we couldn't ship out the Stella Artois looking Gillies cans out here, so we thought we'd do at least our onus of trying to help out. But yeah,
a quick disclaimer: Mr. Gilchrist has nothing to do with these antics. This is all the Fantasy Ruckers being a bunch of goofballs.
And I mean, in all seriousness, like I said, there's still a lot to be revealed around this whole thing. There's still a whole lot of controversy. There is still a whole lot of fogginess and gray area that is being involved. Like I said, the MLR, as we are recording this podcast, excuse me, has not released anything in words that describe what rules were violated. They only say, and I quote, "Due to a violation of league rules, the LA Giltinis and also the Gilgronis have been disqualified from the 2022 Major League Rugby competition." As of yet, that's all we know. In fact, that's all we know that is true. Hey. So until more information comes out, we'll find out. But you guys will be first to know on how this impacts the MLR and also the fantasy rugby that's happening in Major League Rugby as well.
And just silver lining, and just it's been a tough year for the Dallas Jackals. I just want to talk about this quickly for a silver lining of this.
Could you imagine? The third team that came out was the Dallas Jackals?
Look,
that would just be kicking a team while they're down, man.
And hey, boys, 5th place in the Western Conference. They didn't even need to win a game.
Let's go.
For the Dallas Jackals. What an inaugural season. 5th place.
They went talking? 5th place. True.
They went through all the adversity. They went through all of the the
trials
fall,
and tribulations,
the falls,
the
and the
falls,
hardships.
the injuries.
Yeah, and they pulled through, came out on top of both of Mr. Gilchrist's squad. What a season! What a season! If there's
Now,
anything to take away, Jackals, take that.
Is that the first time in any sport in the history of the world of sports that a team doesn't finish in last without winning a game? 0-16 sitting in fifth place.
I feel like that has to be a yes.
If they have
Right?
made history in sports history, oh, that is a season, boys. Dallas Jackals, you are in for a great
You know what the
one
best
this year.
part is? You've been butchering this Gilchrist guy all year, and now you get to end off the season with both of his teams flunking out of the playoffs. And just,
That is true. We were
Hey,
from
look.
the beginning. It started. This podcast started right 22 episodes ago. It started with us figuring out why the heck Gilchrist called his teams the Giltinis and the Gilgronis, and now both those teams, Vandy, to your point, are both out of the playoffs. What a bookend of a fantasy
There we
rugby
go.
hey, what
season.
a wild
right?
ride,
Fantastic.
boys! Hey,
There we
what a
go.
wild ride!
But yeah,
Great to
let's
be-
let's
hey,
hop.
It was great to be on this ride with you boys. Just fantastic, Mr. Gilchrist. Thank you for this wild ride you put us on.
There we go. So let's move on here to round 18. Now, round 18 got a whole lot more interesting with these disqualifications. Obviously, heading into the weekend, it was only known that the Gilgronis were disqualified. Nonetheless, that did add a little bit of drama to the weekend. So we're going to break down some of these games. We are going to also mention some of the fantasy performances as well quickly as we go through them, because you guys will need to know how these guys are performing from a fantasy perspective if you're going to do well in this Fantasy Ruckers MLR Playoff Challenge that we're going to announce in just a moment's time. Before we get there, let's break down round 18. It was the San Diego Legion on bye. They were on bye and they still managed to buy a ticket into the playoffs.
Baby!
That's pretty funny. We'll explain how that all broke down. But the first match of the week was the New England Free Jacks taking on Rugby New York. Rugby New York coming on top with this one, 21-14. They scored kind of like gritty tries. They're all within the 5-meter line tries, where New England Free Jacks kind of, as typical, were able to have a few explosive plays here and there that were able to get those 14 points on the board. I'm not really putting any stake into this New England Free Jacks performance. They had the playoffs locked up. I can't imagine that they were that motivated to play this match, but Rugby New York coming on top in this one, 21-14.
Yeah, their set piece was bumping that game. I think 3 tries from their set piece.
For Rugby New York?
Yeah.
I believe I don't think it was 3 set piece tries, but I do think that it was a lot of forward heavy pack stuff. And them getting grinded in at the end. I think you might be thinking about Rugby Atlanta, but Rugby New York also being gritty there.
Oh yeah. No, I guess yeah. But did you guys see that little scrum? I can't remember what minute it was on. It was the high tackle by somebody on I think it was New York. I can't remember who the high tackle was, and then they just start going. Guys are jumping in the pile. I'm like, this is a hockey scrum, baby. I switched over from the playoffs. I'm like, same stuff. Let's go. Juicing me up.
There we go. There was one also portion, I believe. I forget who scored the try on New England, but it happens in rugby the most too. When a guy goes into the try line, scores, and then the guy who tried to defend the try gets caught up in their celebration. So Chance Wengluski was in the try zone.
Dragged into the pile.
Yeah, Chance Wengluski was in the end zone, and then everyone just swarmed. I forget who scored the try on New England, but everyone swarmed him, and he got stuck in there, and he's trying to claw his way out to get out. And I'm just like, man, I see that way too often in rugby. I think it's hilarious. But Matt, what were you gonna say?
Catch by Code to finish off the game too. When
Pretty
they
impressive,
were pressing, that was a nice catch, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think this is crazy momentum for Rugby New York going into the playoffs. I mean, yeah, the New England Free Jacks got the bye, but they got a bye thinking about this loss to a team that, I mean, they didn't play Ed Fidel. Co-started with Naholo and Nehe Milner-Scudder.
Which was cool to see. It was really cool to see Co lining up with a bunch of All Blacks. I thought that was awesome.
But that means that they can have all 3 of those guys in there. And we saw how deadly those guys were in the week prior. The other thing is Andy Ellis started at 10. Andy Ellis is not their starting 10. They've got Sam Windsor, right? And maybe this is how they're going to go forward. But, this is momentum for Rugby New York. And the fact that they're even able to kind of grit this one out with a lot of forward tries with Andy Ellis, a sneaky little pick at the goal line. I mean, I think this is might tell us a lot about this New York team and what might be to come this next few weeks.
Well, you're right. I mean, the Eastern Conference goes through New England, right? And for you to get a win in your last regular season round, and it does give you a lot of confidence because you know, hey, we can do this. If we can get past Rugby Atlanta in the Eastern Conference semifinals, we already beat New England. Who says that we can't do it again, right? So, no, that's a great point, Matt. Fantasy performance, I'll get into it. Sam Windsor, 4 points. Caleb Geiger, 5.5 fantasy points. That was the set piece there off of the maul that you're talking about, Vandy. Really, really impressive there. 5.5 fantasy points for him. And then Kololo Tuiloma, 5.1 fantasy points, scoring that one off the 1 meter line on the pick and go. Pretty impressive for the Rugby New York, like Maddie says. And then for the New England Free Jacks side, not many points scored, like you said, only 14 points, so there's not going to be much fantasy contributions from these teams. I will say this was Bodine Waka's first time in negative points. He racked up the yellow card there. He was able to score a couple conversions there that didn't make the hurt as bad, but still -2 for Bodine Waka. Not going to put much stake into that, but 6.7 points for Terrell Peda, and then also 7 points for Paula Balakena, who scored a pretty try as well for the New England Free Jacks. So that is the matchup. Yeah, a lot of confidence for Rugby New York. The team that they will be facing in the Eastern Conference semifinals, Rugby Atlanta, booking that home field advantage by getting a huge win over the NOLA Gold. I would say a pretty big statement win over the NOLA Gold, 45-19. It was pretty close at half. It was pretty tight going back and forth between NOLA and Rugby Atlanta, but then Rugby Atlanta in that second half just going away with it, and they were impressive from the set piece. 4 try assists for the Rugby Atlanta set piece, all of them coming off of line-out mauls. If Rugby Atlanta can do that, we know how strong this forward pack can be. That's what got them to the final last season. If they can keep on rolling like this into these playoffs, man, it's going to be impressive.
Yeah, and Jans wasn't even in there.
No,
he wasn't. It wasn't even Jans, Vons, Johns, Rensburg.
Jans, Vons, Long Johns was out of the lineup. He was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's impressive to see. I mean, that's just a lot of depth that they showed, But hey, look, the one thing I got to say is that I think New York or New Jersey's kind of happy they don't have home field advantage. They didn't want to play their playoff game on a high school pitch anyway. So
I don't know, man. They get a lot of people out on those stadiums, dude. It might be a high school pitch.
Sunday, so yeah, of course they have a lot of people watching. People trying to get their tennis matches in right beside the field.
Oh my God. All right, we'll leave it at that. But
anyways, back to the game. Just a dominant forward performance from Rugby Atlanta, which you expect and you love to see. But yeah, for a second there watching that at the start of the game, I thought, maybe NOLA Gold can pull this one through, because that's the prediction I made last week. But look, Rugby Atlanta is another class side, and I think it's just building up to a really great game that we're going to see in this Eastern Conference matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantasy performances on the Rugby Atlanta side, like I said, when you're scoring 4 set piece tries, you're going to get a lot of points for that set piece bonus point. Rugby Atlanta getting 9 fantasy points off of that. Man, that's really, really impressive. 8.8 for Duncan Van Schalwick, 6.5 for Connor Cook, Alex Mon 5.5, Kirk Coleman 8.5. He looked pretty fancy there with some of his moves subbing in there early in the match, and then 11.2 for Tiana Rasmus, who was the benefactor of 2 different tries off of the maul. Man, if Rugby Atlanta can do this with their set piece, it's going to be really, really difficult. But if there's a team that can do it, it might be Rugby New York, who's not only have shown glimpses of being able to match up from the forward perspective too, but they also have that explosive black line with Wysocki Nahalo, Sam Windsor, Andrew Coe, Nehe Milner-Scudder, Ed Fidow, all that jazz. But we'll get into that breakdown in just a bit. And then on the NOLA Gold side, there were plenty of fantasy performances there as well. If you take a closer look, Pat O'Toole 5.5 fantasy points, Devin Short 6.9, and then Ross Depperschmidt 5.5 fantasy points as well. So just kind of a morale booster match for NOLA, but they couldn't pull one out of the bag off of a Rugby Atlanta team that just seemed to be rolling. The next game, though, is going to be one that there's quite a bit to talk about, because obviously the Gilgronis didn't have anything to play for heading into this match. The Houston SaberCats already locking up their playoff spot, but in the battle, they still had the little bit of hardware up for grabs there in the Texas Cup between these two teams, and it got really gritty, guys, between these two teams. Saw a couple red cards as well. But before we break that down, what were your thoughts on Gilgronis SaberCats?
I mean, it's got to be interesting to have to play after that type of news. I mean,
right?
The day after you're playing. You're trying to figure out what the heck you're playing for. You know, one day before you're going into a final or expected to have a bye week, then the next minute or the next day, you figure out that, hey, this game means nothing, and basically we're just playing for this Texas Cup that, hey, I mean, maybe that gets taken away from them too. Who knows? But but yeah, I mean, gritty game. I'm sure that the Gilgronis had some angers to get out, and
you can tell.
And Houston, I mean, maybe this just says something about exactly what we're losing from the Western Conference. Just the fact that Houston is losing to the Gilgronis, who would have been at the top, and Houston is now number 1 seed, and it seems to look like this game kind of told me that, hey, maybe the East is the beast when you're comparing the two conferences now.
Yeah, and I do want to get into kind of that grittiness that happened that we saw in the game later around the 60th minute. Jake Turnbull knocking down a guy recklessly, really no need for that. And then after that, even more no need for whatever. Nora, I'm trying to say his name properly here before I get into it.
Kelly.
Kelly Naromaitoga, he came in flying after that, and he made sure that Jake Turnbull got what he deserved, I guess, after doing what he did. But there is no place for that in rugby. I mean, Matt, you know this. Even if a guy does that, like let's say Jake Turnbull does that, in rugby, it's a pretty known rule that, you know, you do a lot of grabbing, you hold on to guys, you tell this guy stuff, but you don't get physical, you don't throw strikes or anything like that. That's when the cards are going to come out. We don't need that in the game of rugby, especially here in North America as we try to grow this thing. That's not what we want to be promoting here when it comes to rugby.
Yeah, you grab jerseys and you just wait for the guy to punch you in the face. And if nobody punches each other, then there you go. You're both you both get to keep playing.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I've never played, but I mean, after the cheap shot that Pelefoga Cowley, or however you say that.
Nice.
Pele Cowley, yeah.
Yeah. You know, between that one and the Jake Turnbull, you know, you see these guys get eliminated. They're taking liberties on your guys. I mean, you got a guy that subs in, takes a shot like that. I mean, this is the hockey guy, obviously speaking football, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, right,
you're right.
That you take a penalty in hockey, right? You take a penalty in hockey. It's in that game, right? Usually if it's a fighting, whatever, you get the 5-man major, it affects you in that game. Red cards are going to affect you for the long run. And especially as you head into playoffs, hey, there might be a suspension coming down the line. You don't know. And I don't know how much of an impact it was expected for my Kelly Naromaitoga, because this was his first appearance in Houston. But hey, there's a chance that he might not be available for the upcoming matches because of this red card. We'll have to see whether or not that has some later implications. So obviously from a fantasy perspective, -8 points for Naromaitoga, 6.1 for Axel Zapata, 5.2 for Emmanuel Albert. Both of those, find the try line. And then on the Austin Gilgronis side, pulling up a quick look here, 2.5 for Mac Mason, Hugh Roach, 5.4, Bryce Campbell, 5.2. That guy is able to bust through tackles so easily, man. It's pretty crazy. Zinzan Elan Pudik, 5.2. And then Faka Osi Pifaletti, 5.1 fantasy points there as well. And then, Vandy, you mentioned it, the yellow card to Pele Cowley, -4 for him. Moving on to the next matchup, we'll only touch on it a little bit more here because it is Vandy's boys, the Utah Warriors. They took on the Dallas Jackals, and talk about ending on a high note. A little bit of a slow start for these two teams. The Dallas Jackals scoring that early try off.
I didn't expect them to open it up, but
right off the bat there. But then from that point on, it was kind of a slower first half, but that second half was all dominated by the Utah Warriors. You talk about a huge performance by scrum half Danny Christensen, a guy that really hasn't had much fantasy impact this season long, but he ended up scoring 3 tries in this match, mind you, against the Dallas Jackals. But nonetheless, a hat-trick performance is impressive against any side. But overall thoughts, guys, about the Dallas Jackals and Utah Warriors quickly.
I didn't think that was an obstruction penalty. for that to call the try back, but
You won 33-5. Live with it, all right? Live
he
with it.
scored right after that in the 80th minute. That's what you get.
Anyway,
That wasn't
what I was going to
obstruction.
say is,
Paul Asike played a great block. He didn't touch him. I literally heard them say the Utah guy initiated the contact. Watch it again. He didn't initiate nothing. What?
When it's Paul Asike, he's initiating everything.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, seriously though. But yeah, what I was gonna say, I mean, who's not scoring hat tricks against the Dallas Jackals? First of all, so it just seems to be a trend. I mentioned in the Discord that's the second time this season that a Utah Warrior player has scored a hat trick against the Dallas Jackals, and that was the second and third hat trick in Utah Warrior history.
Hey, Danny Christensen, though, he's looking good, man.
Well, thank goodness, I guess Niall Saunders talked back to the ref and got suspended because you guys need Danny Christensen. I guess you'd rather have him in there. So good thing that he made himself unavailable. But yeah, I mean, not much to say other than Vandy, congrats. I mean, finished fourth in the Western Conference. You're only 3 wins away from making the playoffs. So you just needed 3 more games against the Dallas Jackals, and you could have been there. You could have been right there. But hey, no, it's not much else to say other than that, really.
How do I always end up catching strays out here?
But let's break some down here, boys. Maybe this will make you a little bit feel a little bit better, Vandy. Tyler Fisher looking good, 12.4 fantasy points for him. Danny Christensen, like we said, 3 tries led to 19 fantasy points. Joe Mano, 4.2. And I gotta mention it too. Paul Asike, he did get a try assist there, but it was off of his classic right off the scrum. We're giving it to Paul Asike as the first receiver. We're barreling through. You're gonna try to hit me. Instead of this time, I'm gonna give it off and hand it off to, I believe it was I want to say Joe Mano or what? No, it was Danny Christensen.
No,
Danny Christensen come back on the inside. Yeah.
I mean, look, everybody's expecting this big boulder to come through, and next thing you know, the ball's in Danny Christensen's hands, and he's scoring tries.
Yeah, fair enough. And then Dallas Jackals side, obviously not so much, except for Carlo Denishin, who was able to find a try line early in the match, 5.1 fantasy points for him. And then talk about high-scoring affairs. The Toronto Arrows taking on the Old Glory DC in Toronto. This is what the third week that Old Glory DC has been in one of these high scoring matchups. They love
Old Glory the whole year, man.
But they love scoring tries, but they don't like tackling. I think that's what they like doing, honestly.
Well,
it's the frosted tips.
We know why. We know why, right?
Why?
They're allergic. We went over this last show.
What do we need to do? What do we need to do, Matt?
Nobody got them the EpiPen yet. They're still waiting. No,
you got to do it, man. You got to do it.
Man, get the EpiPen.
You got to get the EpiPen out.
They got to put it in because they got to stop being allergic to tackling. But hey, they got all off season to think about that. They can figure it out. They'll learn how to put their shoulder in. But the reason why I think that they're scoring all these points is Bobberts Tanana.
He's
dyed his hair blue, and now
ever since he did that, he's been dope.
That's what I'm saying. That's all we got to talk about. I mean, Roberts Tanana.
Dude, that kick to himself was nasty.
Ridiculous. Renata Roberts Tanana looking absolutely stellar. Yeah, that little boot up chip over the top to himself was pretty impressive.
But what I will say as well on Old Glory DC on a serious note is that they got to be taking this going into finishing off the season on this note, beating Toronto the way that they did. I mean, they were down at one point and coming back and putting up points. Finally finishing a win away from home, nonetheless in Toronto, where Toronto has always been so good. That has got to be a great way to finish off the season. All the key guys really contributed that they needed to contribute. And I'm sure they're heading into the offseason and into next season, even thinking about how much better that they can be if they just play this way all year round.
I think they figured out, they found a way to just activate Penny Lasaka and Roberts Tanana every game, man. Those guys, that steal from Penny Lasaka was downright disgusting. Yeah. And then just breakaway speed.
How fast is Penny Lasaka, man? There's not a lot of athletes in this league, but there's something about a few guys in there. We talked about this last week about Ed Fidau's second year, but Penny Lasaka seems to have that same thing where he just turns it on and just flies. And you're right. A lot of those big time scoring tries do seem to surround around Penny Lasaka and Renata Roberts Tanana there as well. But let me talk about DC's last 4 matches, okay? we're talking about 4 weeks ago. They lose to NOLA 50-21. Okay, so obviously they're starting the whole allergic to tackling thing there. The week after that, they have the historic scoring matchup against Houston, 59-42. Then they follow that up against Rugby New York, where they reset the highest scoring matchup, 59-49, still losing this one. So off those 3 matches, they were in high scoring affairs, not able to get the dub, but at least this time they were on the winning end of things, still putting up 50 points to Toronto Arrows 35. But talk about just being finishing off the season with high scoring affairs for the Old Glory DC. I will mention too, it is to your point, Matt, about being kind of optimistic heading into the next year's campaign. Old Glory DC was a team that we were talking about earlier in the year when we were like only a few weeks in, a few matches in, that we thought that this team, we knew they weren't going to be as bad as Dallas, but they were struggling to get that first win early in the season, and for them to turn it around the way they did here at this point, to be, scoring the way that they are in these final few matches is pretty optimistic. Mm-hmm. Some fantasy performances from this matchup in this big win for Old Glory DC, 50-39 over Toronto. 9.2 fantasy points for Danny Tusitala. 50-35 for Old Glory DC. Tavita Nakali, 6.9. Renata Roberts Tanana with that beautiful up and under try, 7.5 fantasy points. William Talataina looking good there, 10.7, 6.5 for Junior Sao. Penny Lasaka, 13.4 off of that big steal that Vandy mentioned. And then Felix Calapau also getting 8.8 fantasy points there as well. And then the Toronto Arrows side, I got to mention it. Congratulations to Paul Cellini for being the first Canadian player to hit 50 MLR caps. Very, very, very impressive for Paul Cellini. He's a guy that we played with in our high school days. Very, very talented player. And I'm going to mention this as well. This guy has not scored a try all season long, I believe. And then he scores 2 set piece tries. And I rewatched those set pieces. There is no question that the Toronto Arrows heading into this matchup were like, okay, we're going to get Paul Cellini at least a try in his 50th cap, because usually it's Jack McRogers coming off the back on those mauls, or Andrew Quattrin that's coming the back off those lineouts and setting up in those mauls and bringing the ball back and becoming that carrier. But they purposely had Cellini back out of the lineout when the ball came down. He would come down, Cellini would then join, and then instead of McRogers coming around and grabbing the ball, it was Cellini coming in and snatching that up. And Jack was still behind him. And there were parts where I was thinking maybe Jack's trying to like take the ball away and he wanted it. But there's no question that they were trying to set Cellini up to get him a couple tries in his big matchup. So congratulations to him. He was able to get 11.3 fantasy points. Toronto Arrows off of those 2 set beat tries, 5 fantasy points for him. 9.1 for Denon Robinson Bartlett for off of that very early first minute try, and then Marcelo Wainwright, 8.9 fantasy points, a kind of a garbage time try. But in this match, it was really, outside being tight in that first half, Old Glory DC in that second half really blew it away. And that's where I think a lot of the optimism comes in, which is impressive. And then the last matchup of the week had to be one of the most, I guess, dramatic matchups in terms of what was on the line before we knew it. LA Giltinis taking on the Seattle Seawolves. The Seattle Seawolves needing at least 2 points. So they needed to get the 2 bonus points in order to book their ticket into the playoffs, with the Austin Gilgronis being disqualified, not knowing yet that the Giltinis would soon be disqualified. But hey, man, the Seawolves looking dang good against the LA Giltinis, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely impressive to see the Seawolves come out and beat the Giltinis, especially the way they did. Yeah, they look really dangerous. I mean, I think that maybe Houston is statistically or in the standings number 1 in the Western Conference, but the Seawolves team looks dangerous. I think that it'll be, I don't think there's a clear-cut number 1 between the 3 teams that are in there. And I mean, yeah. That's really all there is. The other thing is that I think the Seawolves were also resting some guys as well. I think there's a few guys that were not in their lineup or not in their usual position. I mean, Ross Neal was at 13. Nakai Penny wasn't in the lineup, who's a usual starter for them. And they still came out with, a decisive win. And these guys stepped up, and the usual guys, Alatimu, Duncan Matthews, Cepho all stepped up. But the other thing, I guess the Giltinis, I mean, ball don't lie. You lose to the Seawolves, you don't deserve to be in the playoffs anyways.
Well, to be fair, there was quite a few TMO moments there too.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
you
fair
know,
enough.
when Duncan Matthews punched the ball out of whose hands, I can't remember, right before he put the ball down in the try zone, that was big. And then obviously the call on Lindsey Stevens, I think it was. He lifted the legs of the one guy, which they ended up bringing back. They said that caused the turnover, which didn't give him a try. So, I mean, right there, that's 14 points that, you know, wow, like I guess the Giltinis did shoot themselves in the foot with those, but I mean, at the end of the day,
What else
14
is
points
new
they
with the
didn't put on the
Giltinis,
board.
though? That's what they've been doing
true.
all season, right? So
True.
it's not really anything.
And then
new.
the yellow card by Surreal Connor or whatever, Kama, or
Nice.
you know, in the last 10 minutes to ice the game. I'm like, man, you guys are beating yourselves. Like,
but that's how it's been all season. Like we've said this from when they went on that 0-4 stretch.
when they
right?
lose, they literally shoot themselves in the foot. It's crazy.
Exactly. But on the bright side of things for the LA Giltinis, I mean, hey, Billy Meeks is an absolute mean. That guy has no hair, but he has.
He's mean, man.
God,
he's
goodness.
Yeah. So Bill Meeks, we'll talk about his fantasy performance. 7.8 fantasy points for him, 6.1 for Charlie Abel, 5.6 for Christian Rodriguez. And you mentioned Evander Cyril-Kama getting -4 for that yellow card that he received. And we go on to the Seattle Seawolves side. I mean, AJ Alatimu keeps on impressing me every single week that he's in the game. His distribution, the way he's able to control the play, his playmaking ability is just fantastic. We saw it last week, a couple try assists off of a couple nice kicks that he made, and then this week he had a couple of nice balls there that led to scoring opportunities. He got 10.5 fantasy points. I will not be surprised if AJ Alatimu is one of the top picks of next year's draft if he is in that same situation. I think he has the same opportunity as Bodine Waka in terms of, you know, being able to kick, being able to distribute in the way, and when you add that all together, I think that cooks up to be a really dangerous fantasy player. Some other fantasy players, James Malcolm, 5.5 fantasy points. Martin Ayusefu, man, he was flying on that try, 12.7 fantasy points. Lion Ufuti, 6.1, and then Duncan Matthews with that late try, 6.7 fantasy points for him. But yeah, a very impressive win for the Seattle Seawolves, who ended up getting the win, so more than the 2 points necessary to buy their ticket into playoffs. But then they found out later that it was going to be that very same team that they played that was going to get disqualified, that we found out yesterday, and they didn't even need it at the end of the day. So all that drama was left for nothing, and San Diego Legion buying their ticket in, and now it's the Houston SaberCats, Seattle Seawolves, and San Diego Legion in the playoffs. And then on the Eastern Conference side, obviously the New England Free Jacks, Rugby Atlanta, Rugby New York to finish it off. So hey, a pretty fun wrap up to the 2022 season in the MLR, and no shortage of controversy to finish it off as well.
But hey, we can leave that all in the dust now. You know, regular season in the dust. Doesn't matter anymore. You know, controversy, drama, Mr. Gilchrist in the dust. Don't gotta worry about it.
You love saying that.
Now we get to this playoff challenge, and this is what I've been waiting for this entire show. Ryan. And I can't wait for you to explain this to us, because you have been teasing it, and I am excited for me to participate and finally win something here, and two, for just all the lads, all the fans, maybe not lads, maybe ladettes, they can all join and they can all be a part of it. So let's get into it, Ryan.
Absolutely. And that's going to be Commissioner Yee's League Update. Hear ye. This is Commissioner Yee with the league update. And it's not so much of a league update anymore, but so much as a fantasy rugby update as a whole. And that was a great teaser there leading into it. We do have a Fantasy Ruckers Playoff Challenge. And the biggest thing too, as well, guys, is that it's not just for our league members. No. It is not just for our Fantasy Ruckers community members. As much as we'd love to have everyone join our Fantasy Ruckers community, it's not just for them. It is for everyone. If you have any inkling in your body that wants to get a little tiny taste of fantasy rugby, this is the challenge for you. So it's time to break it down. It's something that I've been working on for the past couple weeks or so, trying to figure out how I would be able to do this. A little bit of a different format than what our league members did in the entirety of the fantasy MLR rugby season. A little bit of a quick playoff challenge here, but I'm going to explain it to all of you. Rules, the way that you can submit your lineups and all that is all going to be posted up on social media. And if you need any clarification, you can always join the Discord channel. You can always ask me, the commissioner. I'm in there interacting with our community as well. The league members will definitely help you out as well. So make sure you follow at the Fantasy Ruckers to get all the latest scoop and the details that you'll need to compete in this Fantasy Ruckers playoff. Fantasy Ruckers MLR Playoff Challenge. So now with that being said, let's break it down. So the rules are as this. Players who want to join the challenge will be submitting 5 players. You have 5 players to choose from. You're going to choose a front row, a second row, back row hybrid, a scrum half, fly half hybrid, a back 3 center hybrid, and then a set piece bonus point. Okay, so you're gonna have 5 roster positions to fill. And now, like I said, it's a little bit of a different format. You're gonna be competing in a quote unquote rotisserie style. So you'll be collecting points over the course of these playoffs. You won't be making up any ads. You won't be making any drops. If a guy that you have gets on a team that is eliminated, too bad. You're not gonna get any more points from that player for the rest of the playoffs. You are gonna select 5 players on any of the playoff contending teams. You are then going to submit those lineups to me, and then I will keep track of how the players are performing throughout the playoffs, and we'll update the rankings as they go. But there is a catch. You cannot just pick any 5 players that fall into those positional categories. There is, I should say, going to be a salary cap. And I know that word is a little bit of a coincidental term to be using right now. But that being said, everyone is going to have $15 to spend to fill out their 5-player lineup. And I have attributed values based on their fantasy performances, how much value that they cost. So here, I'll break it down a little bit for you and give you guys some examples. So we look here at the center or back 3 position. Okay, so that means that in this position, it can either be a center player or a back 3 player. And I have the total list here, and that is going to go by the positional, the positions that they were allocated in our fantasy league. So right now, as you can imagine, the top value of $5 is Ed Fidow and Joe Peterson. Okay, and then following up in the $4 range, you can pick players like Mitch Wilson, Leroux Milan, Yaquindila Vega Mendia, Martin Ayasefo, Loritz Vanderskiff. There are other players. So it's all about figuring out where you're going to distribute your money into those positions. And I will say it is your job to ensure that you have a kicker. You don't have to choose a kicker, but I'll just say that there is some advice here that kickers have been pretty significant and pretty impactful in our fantasy season. So I can only imagine that they're going to be impactful in this season. And hey, there is no limit to you choosing one kicker. You can have multiple kickers if you can fit them in your salary cap, but that is going to mean that you're going to be hurting at other positions. Nonetheless, hey, the strategy is the way it goes. Guys, hearing this for the first time, what are your thoughts on this? You excited for this playoff challenge? I'm excited to get more than just our league members, more than just the Fantasy Ruckers community. I'm excited to get everyone involved in this to get a taste of fantasy rugby. What are your thoughts on this after hearing it for the first time?
So just to clarify.
Yeah.
Oh, I really like it, by the way. But just to clarify, we can have multiple kickers. We do. Even if we draft multiple kickers, we don't have to designate one kicker.
Exactly. So if you find a kicker in there, that maybe is at a value of $2, hey, throw them in. But I will say that they have been distributed based on their fantasy performance. So yeah, they may have kicked a few times in the season, but will they be kicking in playoff time?
I got you.
Who knows? So you'll have to make that decision.
Obviously, if they were a prominent kicker, kickers correlate with points. They're worth money. Okay.
There's a reason why Joe Peterson is worth $5, right?
Because he's God. He should be worth $6.
Well, there we go. I mean, hey, this is awesome. One, love it. Can't wait to compete with some.
Yeah, this will be fun.
Some of the people in the Discord community. Some of the people maybe just who follow along on Reddit. Maybe some of the people who are just hearing about it for the first time. I'm excited to compete against you. I'm excited to beat you. All right, that's my first thing. I'm sure a bunch of questions will be answered in the Discord community or wherever, maybe on Reddit or wherever on the social media platforms. Regardless, my only question is, what happens if I do spend $16 instead of $15? Is there a punishment for that?
Yeah, you get disqualified from playoffs.
Okay, but you don't tell anybody though, right?
The old Gilgronis catch.
There we go. Well, yeah, so you got it. You pick the players. I will have the positional values posted on our Discord channel. I will be making a post on Reddit, and I'm going to try to fit it all on our socials so that people can view it there as well. But it should be fun. And you know what's great about it too? Yours truly, the commissioner, can compete as well. I can finally play a little bit of fantasy rugby. I will be partaking in the Fantasy Ruckers MLR Playoff Challenge. So it will be fun to finally compete against our league members, fun to compete against our community members.
Eyes and ears open. We gotta keep. We gotta watch this guy. We gotta watch this guy. This guy's got all the numbers. He's got all the stats. He's got all the control. We don't know what he's up to. We don't know.
Hey, the players that I choose, other people are going to have them. So if there's a way to skew the point, other people are going to get their points skewed too. So that's why it's so fun to do this playoff challenges that, I can get involved too, which is going to be a lot of fun. I think this should be a good way to get people involved in fantasy rugby for the first time. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see who comes out on top at the end because, like I said, it's going to be a 3-week stretch. It's going to include the conference semifinals, the conference finals, and also the obviously the MLR championship final as well. And like I mentioned, I will reiterate, there are no pickups, there are no waiver pickups, there's no changing of the lineups midway through the playoffs. You go with the playoff lineup that you pick them, you stick them. Exactly. That's the way she goes. So that is the Fantasy Ruckers MLR Playoff Challenge. More info will be on all our socials at the Fantasy Ruckers and on Discord, like we said. So make sure you go check that out. And hey, we want to get as many people involved in this Fantasy Ruckers MLR Challenge as we can. So please spread the word. If you know anyone that wants to get into fantasy rugby, if you know anyone that just likes rugby and wants to maybe try out something different, I think this is a great way to get into it. So spread the word and tell them about the Fantasy Ruckers MLR Playoff Challenge.
Yep.
So moving on here, guys, and speaking of those playoffs and the challenges and those matchups that we'll be watching in order that with all those points being scored, I think we need to put a little bit on the line here. So we're going to go through this bracket, Vandy and Matt, and we're going to go through our picks, and we're going to see who gets the closest to this MLR playoff right. And we're going to go through each matchup and figure out whose bracket is going to be the most accurate in a few weeks' time here. So we're going to go through the matchups, and then we'll make our picks, and then we'll put those in the bank, and we'll see how we do with those after all of this shakes out. So the like I mentioned, the two teams that finished the top of the conferences, the New England Free Jacks and the Houston SaberCats, surprisingly, with the disqualification of the Austin Gilgronis and the LA Giltinis. So in the Eastern Conference and Western Conference semifinals, you got on the East, Rugby Atlanta taking on Rugby New York at home. And then you got the Seattle Seawolves taking on the San Diego Legion in Seattle. I'll lend it to you guys first. Matt, why don't you go first? Who are you thinking is going to win in this Rugby Atlanta, Rugby New York matchup in Atlanta?
Yeah, I'm supporting the boys, the friend of the show. I'm supporting the All Blacks sitting on that squad. I'm supporting the team across the river in New Jersey. We got Rugby New Jersey is going to take this dub for sure.
What about you, Vandy?
You know what?
I dare you to say them. Say them. Say the name. Say Rattle.
You know what? With this just in, 2 more teams have been kicked out. Utah's in the playoffs, baby.
Come on.
Imagine here, Vandy. While you think here, if you need a moment to think,
No.
I'm ready. Okay.
I'm going with Rugby New York. You know what? Dominant team. I think when that backline's rolling.
You would.
We're gonna be like that. We're gonna go straight off the top, all three of us. All right, I'm going Rugby New York too. I'll go Rugby New York too. I know it was impressive with what Rugby Atlanta was able to do, especially in this last match with their set piece. But I do think if there's one team that is able to counteract that, it is Rugby New York. They do have a formidable front pack as well. We've seen it throughout the season. And then you add to that backline that they have that I do think is superior to Rugby Atlanta. Just that constant threat of having the ability of either Wasaki Nahalo, Nahim Milner-Scudder, or Ed Fidau being able to explode for a try of 50 plus meters.
Or Andrew Coe.
Or Andrew Coe, of course, is something that's a deadly threat that you cannot really prepare for. So I think that gives Rugby New York the slight edge over there. And then we go to Seattle Seawolves, San Diego Legion on the Western Conference side. Both these teams not really thinking that they'd be in the playoffs, but nonetheless they find themselves in the playoffs, fighting to get to that conference final. Matt, Seawolves, Legion, who you got?
I'm gonna go Seawolves. San Diego Legion are missing a few key guys. I think Will Hooley's still out. Matthias Fryer's still out. Seawolves just came off a huge win. They'll pull that momentum through and they'll beat the San Diego Legion. Unfortunately, take down your boy Joe Peterson.
Vandy, what are you thinking?
Don't pick the Seawolves. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going against.
I feel like I got to, but you know what? I already know that Ryan's thinking Seawolves, so I got to spice it up a bit. Joe has carried me through more. You know what? I'm picking my boy. And Mike Smith.
It'll be interesting to see whether or not Joe Peterson maybe lines up at the 10, or if we see Henderson, who looked pretty impressive last week.
He's going fullback. Old Joe's going fullback.
So we'll see. I mean, he's listed in our playoff challenge. He's listed at the back 3 position. He's not eligible for the fly half position. So even if he starts there at the fly half position, he's only going to be available there to fill out that back 3 spot in our playoff challenge. So we'll see. Where he lines up in that thing. But yeah, you're right, Vandy. You guessed it on the point. I'm going Seawolves. That LA Giltinis Seawolves match really pushed me over the edge. They're really impressed with how the Seawolves played there. And then also, this is a Seawolves team that has been here, done that. They have won MLR championships in the past. They just needed to get here. They have that experience. They have one of the leading try scorers in Riekert Hatting. I think Seawolves are able to get that done. So that leads then to our conference finals. So Matt, you got Rugby New York taking on New England Free Jacks in the Eastern Conference Finals. Who wins that one?
I'm sticking with it. Rugby New Jersey going straight to the finals, baby.
Wow, beating the New England Free Jacks, eh?
Well, they just did it.
Fair enough. Even though it was a side. Too. True. Bodine Walker didn't play that much in that match either, though.
True.
No, Fidel wasn't playing at all.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I can't say that. All right. Rugby New York to the final. Vandy, you got the same thing. You got Rugby New York taking on the New England Free Jacks. Who are you going with?
I love me some Bodine Walker, but I have to agree with Matt.
Rugby New York. All right. You know what?
I'll say it now. I'm going to pick Rugby New York to win it all, but
okay. Well, I'm taking
just because Matt was going to beat me there.
I'm taking Rugby New York as well. I do think that they can beat the New England Free Jacks. I mean, when you got, dude, it's hard to go against it. It's tough, right? Because I think we're in the decision where how much of the past performance of the regular season contributes into the playoffs versus the potential that a team has. And we know. Why do you keep on shaking your head, Matt? What do you? What?
No, I'm just saying. Look, I don't know if you're alluding to this, but I was just gonna say, like, hey, regular season's done. We don't even have to think about it.
Right. I mean, that's my point. That's what I'm saying is that you have the potential, right? You see Waisaka Nahalo. You see Nahim Milner-Scudder. You see Ed Fidau on there. You see Sam Windsor. You see all these guys that have been in way bigger stages before, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they can go on and win this MLR thing. So yeah, I think I'm as well going to take the Rugby New York as well. So that's Rugby New York going into the final on the Eastern side of things. Let's go to the Western Conference final. We got Seattle Seawolves taking on the Houston SaberCats. Matt, you first, SaberCats or Seawolves?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say Seawolves, but knowing how it's been, the SaberCats are probably going to come in and take it and win it. But I'm sticking with the boys, the Seawolves. I think that the Houston SaberCats are pretty streaky. I just don't know. I don't think they're coming off of a momentum game. And the Seawolves, I think, are just going to continue to carry momentum, continue to roll in. And hey, again, I said this earlier, the SaberCats are not a first seed. The Seawolves are not necessarily a first seed. It's going to make this match competitive, but I think the Seawolves come out on top.
Vandy, you got the Legion taking on the Houston SaberCats. Who you got there?
You know what? I love my boy Joe, but I'm going with Houston.
Really?
Yep.
Really? Wow, that surprises me. Okay.
You know what? The Legion doesn't do well against these teams that play a really solid defense. And Houston does pretty well against these teams with a high-flying offense, I think. You know what? I'll even be bold enough to say I think it's more than 2 tries.
Okay. And I will say, talk about a team that's getting kind of hot at just the right time. Yes, they took the loss against the past couple weeks here, but they've been able to put up points. I mean, they were in that point again, Ogor DC 59-42. They beat the Warriors a few weeks ago, 31-27. They beat the Legion 34-24. So a little bit of a preview there of what might be to come in that Western Conference final. So definitely not a far-fetched thing to say there, Vandy. So yeah, could definitely see the SaberCats beating the San Diego Legion. I got the Seawolves taking on the Houston SaberCats. I'm going to go with the Seawolves in this one. Just like the pedigree, like I mentioned before, they've been there, done that. They're looking impressive, especially against that Giltinis match. I think that'll really pay through. And I mean, this is a team that, maybe they haven't reached their potential all season long, but there are a lot of players on this team that I really do like. AJ Alatimu, Reichert Hadding, Ross Neal, James Malcolm. They added Sean McNulty halfway through the season. There's just a lot of players on the Seawolves team that I really do like, and I do think, like you mentioned, Matt, the Houston SaberCats, I don't think are the team that is, even though they're ranked as the number 1 seed, I don't think on paper they're necessarily the best team in the Western Conference out of these playoffs teams. I do really think that Seawolves are peaking at the right time, so I got to go with the Seawolves here. So that leads to the final, man. Last choice, I got Rugby New York taking on Seattle Seawolves. Matt, you got Rugby New York taking on Seattle Seawolves. Mandy, you got Houston SaberCats taking on Rugby New York.
But
I'm
it doesn't
going to
matter,
assume
we all got Rugby New York.
We all got Rugby New York, don't we?
They're so dominant, man.
Yeah.
They're just so dominant.
I mean,
I don't care who makes it to, like, frankly, in the Western Conference, any of the 3 teams make it to the Western Conference finals. Rugby New York's in that final for the Eastern Conference. What team are you banking on to beat that Rugby New York?
You know what? Even switch it out, Rugby New York with New England. I don't think any of those 3 beat New England.
Right, and that's I guess the point that I was going to, Vandy, that I agree with, is that I think whoever comes out of the Eastern Conference
wins it,
is winning the MLR championship.
I'd have to agree.
Whether it's New England, whether it's Rugby New York, whether it's Rugby Atlanta, I think all 3 of those teams are better on paper than any of the 3 teams that you have in the Western Conference. Now, mind you, we got to all remember the situation that we have been put in these playoffs is due to the crazy amount of controversy that has happened over the past few days. Nonetheless, we have what we have, and I do agree with you guys that I do think the Eastern Conference is the more dominant one. Like you said, Matt, beasts of the East, I guess, and they'll be able to take this down. But hey, we got playoffs, man. Not only do we got MLR playoffs, we got this playoff challenge to be excited about. It's going to be a fun next few weeks, guys. Yeah. You excited for this?
Oh, I'm excited. I mean, last week was a little bit, got to take a break from watching these games so closely, but now I'm coming right back. I'm coming with, determination, hard work. It's another good word to say that makes me sound really, really, really determined to win, something else like that. But I'm going to win this chip.
You're driven.
I'm driven. As Vandy said, I'm coming to take this chip. I'm going to pick the guys to win this chip, and I'm ready to do the research, the homework, the hard work, and all the other work in order to get this dub in this playoff competition.
There we go. Vandy, you just as confident, man?
That was a WWE level hot mic right there. I was ready for you to call me out in the SummerSlam edition. No, man, you know what I'm excited for? I'm excited to beat both yees at this.
Yeah.
Right? I'm cheering it, brother. You know what? I can't wait. Can't wait.
Hey, that's one thing. You guys will finally have your shot at the kind of the master puppeteer that has been working at this all season long. And now bring it on, guys. Come on, I can take it, dude. Talk about the guy.
Smoke. He wants the smoke.
You're taking on the inventor of this thing. Let's go. I think it would be a bad look too. I think it'd be a pretty bad look too if I wasn't at least being competitive in this thing. But I am super excited.
Place there, buddy.
I'm super excited to be competing in this thing. But yeah, everyone listening, make sure you spread the word. All the details are going to be released on our Discord channel as well as on our social media channel. So if you want to get involved, make sure you have a look at both of those places at the Fantasy Ruckers. You'll be able to find the link to join our Discord channel on our socials as well. But maybe basically the way it's going to work is that after you see the rules and after you see the players and their values, you are going to submit them to us at the Fantasy Ruckers through any of our social media channels, through any of our Discord channels, through a message, through a tweet, anything like that. Any of those that we'll get. Maybe we should create like a hashtag or something. Should we create a hashtag, Matt, of some sort? Hashtag Fantasy Ruckers Playoff Challenge.
If we're ready to step it up to that level, then I'm ready to go there with you, Rye.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. So we'll do hashtag Fantasy Ruckers Playoff Challenge. So you're going to submit your lineups. If you do submit them on Twitter, you'll submit them and say hashtag the Fantasy Ruckers Playoff Challenge. And let's get this thing trending. Let's get a bunch of people on this thing. And let's get people joining this challenge and get as many people involved. Because I think it'd be cool if we can get, obviously we had the 8 league members in our league that were competing. But let's just get this thing to everyone so everyone can get a taste of fantasy rugby. So with that being said, man, super excited for these playoffs that are to come. We're gonna break it down all next week. Next week's episode should be fun with that breakdown. We might even have a special guest on the show too to interview to you guys. So you'll want to check that out as well. But that being said, guys, you have anything left for the listeners? I know, Matt, you said your piece about you beating everyone. Vandy, you said your piece. Matt, what about you?
I mean, hey, just look out MLR community. I'm coming for all of you. Even if you're not going to join, even if you're maybe hesitant at joining, I'm still coming for you. And you better join so that you can have the wrath of rock and roll.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it any better myself. But for Matt, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I'm Ryan Yee. We'll look for you on that Fantasy Ruckers Playoff Challenge. But until then, we will see you next week.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.